Bob Condotta, Seattle Times Seahawks reporter, joining us, trying to explain what the heck happened with Colin Kaepernick. So, Bob, what do we know about this meeting and what one side is saying and what the other side is saying?
Well, you're right. Yeah, there are sort of two sides here. The Kaepernick side is that it was that the Seahawks just flat out asked him about whether he would continue to kneel for the anthem or whether he would stand, and that when he said he didn't know, that they scuttled a meeting that they were a visit that they were going to have with him on Monday. The Seahawks side is a little bit more nuanced, that they basically just wanted to know what his plan was, and that he didn't tell them one way or the other what he was going to do, and that I think their side is that it was also a little bit broader than that, just kind of everything. And, what are sort of your plans in general if we sign you? How much is football and how much is everything else that you're sort of involved in, and that he didn't really have a clear plan for them. This is their side of it anyway, I think, of exactly what he could tell them that he would do. And so their view of it is that they didn't cancel the meeting. They weren't done with him. They were just going to postpone it, and that they wanted to kind of get together and make sure they understood what they would be getting into if they were to sign him.
Yeah, but why is anybody surprised with what Colin Kaepernick, his stance, for lack of a better expression, is? And, is Seattle weeding out the bigger personalities, or is that just a coincidence, Bob, that you have Bennett and you have Sherman who are no longer with the team?
Well, yeah, that's sort of two different things. The one thing, and again, the Seahawks view is Kaepernick didn't tell them one way or the other. So I think they wanted to know. So I think they wanted to know, are you going to kneel or are you going to stand?
Okay.
And then we know. So I don't think they wanted to be surprised one way or the other. Like, we sign him, and then the first game, nobody knows what he's going to do, and that becomes the storyline. I think they wanted to know one way or the other. I think they were caught off guard when both Jeremy Lane and Michael Bennett sat for the anthem the first time. They didn't know either time that was going to happen. And, so Pete Carroll's press conferences after the game became basically solely about that. I don't think they wanted that this time. I think they wanted to sort of not be caught off guard by anything that would happen. So I think that's where the fact that Kaepernick wouldn't tell them, apparently one way or the other, what he was going to do became an issue. In terms of weeding out, I do think there's a little bit of I don't think it's for social activism necessarily, as much as just I think there wasn't an aspect of thinking that obviously they didn't have the year last year. They'd had the previous 5. They didn't make the playoffs, and got hammered by the Rams late in the season, and had some other losses that were sort of surprising in the way they happened. And so I think they did feel like there was maybe a need to kind of just turn over the team a little bit. Both Sherman and Bennett, you can totally defend them on just football aspects. I mean, Sherman has an injury. Nobody knows for sure how he's going to come off of that. There's probably not any team really the 49ers didn't sign him to a huge guaranteed contract. They signed him to sort of a one-year prove-it thing as well. The Seahawks, that's what they told Sherman also, was they didn't really want to re-up him to a long-term deal right now, given that. And then Bennett will be 33 and has had knee injuries the last couple of years, and I think they felt his play had slipped a little bit last year also. But certainly, you can look at those and view it as the leadership in the locker room is going to be quite a bit different going forward as well.
What's the local reaction, though, in Seattle with these fans of bringing in Kaepernick? I know it's pretty liberal with your owner and your coach. How's the rest of the city, do you think, as a whole, feel about this?
Well, it's interesting because if you set aside the kneeling for the anthem and everything, Kaepernick obviously was sort of enemy number one for a few years anyway, because he was the quarterback of the 49ers, and they had so many memorable games against them, and obviously the biggest play in Seahawks history, Kaepernick was part of. The Richard Sherman's tipped interception that they clinched the 2013 NFC title game. So I think there's some people just from a football standpoint. It's sort of like he was kind of the enemy, but it's also intriguing because you did see this guy play really well against the Seahawks a few times also. But you're right, from just a city standpoint, I mean, if there's, there wasn't really any blowback to, I mean, Michael Bennett sat for the anthem for all but 2 games last year. Yeah. Most of the defensive line also sat along with him, sort of in solidarity to that. I don't think there was a whole lot of blowback from that. People weren't booing Michael Bennett all over the place or anything like that. I think people were going to be more than accepting of Kaepernick from that standpoint. You
think there's still a chance Kaepernick's on the Seahawks roster?
I don't know. I mean, it was interesting today. You wake up and they signed a guy named Stephen Morris, who I think is hardly going to be the last thing that the Seahawks do from a backup quarterback standpoint. I would say the Seahawks probably could have done without this becoming public when it did. I think they were hoping that this probably could have stayed behind the scenes while they decided if they still wanted to bring him in for a visit. But maybe Kaepernick felt like that wasn't going to happen anyway, and so they felt like it didn't matter if they kind of let this out. But I think it's pretty obvious that this was sort of leaked by the Kaepernick side, and then the Seahawks were sort of in reaction mode to it.
Good stuff, Bob. Thanks for joining us. We appreciate your time.
All right, thank you. Anytime.
Bob Condotta, Seattle Times Seahawks reporter.
For more Dan Patrick Show, tune to Audience Channel 239 on DirecTV or download the Dan Patrick Show app.